Hello, my name is Peter Radcliffe. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Analytics at the University of Minnesota. I'm here with my colleagues Ron Huesman and Raja Singh to talk about how we use SERU as part of our institutional efforts to improve our campus climate. At the University of Minnesota, as with any large, complex institution, strategic planning takes place at multiple levels, with each part of the organization advancing the institution's overall goals within their own context. The University of Minnesota is a 5-campus system, with each campus serving a distinct role, apparent in the fact that each one of them is in a different Carnegie classification. As a result, the achievement of the system's goals need to be situated in the context of each campus and unit. At the highest level, we're guided by the MPACT2025 System-wide Strategic Plan, overseen by the Board of Regents and the University President. At the undergraduate level on the Twin Cities campus, the Strategic Enrollment Management Committee oversees the implementation of the campus enrollment plan, which aligns with the goals of the System-wide Strategic Plan. The Strategic Enrollment Management Committee then also partners with the Office of Equity and Diversity for the Multicultural Student Success Committee to specifically address issues around student success and the student experience for multicultural students, with a further more detailed set of progress measures. Within the MPACT2025 System-wide Strategic Plan are multiple goals and performance measures related to increasing diversity, closing equity gaps, and improving the campus climate. I've highlighted the undergraduate student-related items here, and you can specifically see the use of the sense of belonging item from SERU, along with a variety of other sources. For the 6 indicators with numeric measures, our current values are shown here, and these serve as the baseline from which we're seeking to improve. Through the SERU consortium, we're able to benchmark our survey results as we do for our federally reported data. When we're working on diversity and equity issues, it's important to remember that no category of students is a monolithic group, and the intersection of multiple identities matters for the student experience and student success. We've made a lot of use of this Venn diagram approach, which shows the intersections between race, ethnicity, income, and first-generation status. Collectively, these students represent nearly 40% of our incoming freshmen. Here you can see that our first-year retention rates vary not just with the broad categories, but across the different combinations as well. Assembling data from multiple sources allows us to look across the student life cycle and see how disparities propagate from one stage to the next, from entry to their experience to outcomes. Here, SERU plays a critical role in highlighting campus climate issues that disproportionately impact some of our students, shown by the yellow and red boxes, while the green boxes show that the students who do not fall in these categories tend to be at an advantage at each stage. These demographic categories all come from our student record systems, but SERU allows us to look at demographics that we want to be able to address equity issues, but are not captured in our systems. And Ron will highlight one of those. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Peter. So my name is Ron Huesman, as Peter said, and I'm the Director of Institutional Research and a SERU Principal Researcher. What I'm going to be leading you through here is an illustrative example of how we weave together institutional data that we've exchanged with SERU with demographic data that we collect through the survey. And this example will use race and ethnicity and sexual orientation to look at the intersection of these 2 identities to help us better understand the student experience. We often collect data from our central record systems that, such as race, ethnicity, but these other different demographic data that we collect, such as sexual orientation, gender identity, or immigration status, we only can get through the SERU survey. So by looking at these 2 data sources together, gives us a much better understanding of the intersection of these identities. What I've done for these examples is I've collapsed categories for race, ethnicity into 4 groups: white, unknown, the Hispanic, Black, Native American, and Pacific Islander into 1 category, and the Asian group and international is 2 additional categories to help with our example make it easier to understand and see differences in patterns. For the sexual orientation item, we've created 2 categories: heterosexual, straight, and those who responded as being gay or lesbian, bisexual, queer questioning, and then responses from the other category that matched the queer spectrum categorization. So we created 2 categories from that variable, and we're able to look at the student responses and demographics based on those categorizations. So next slide, Peter. So here we can get an idea of the distributions for Minnesota versus the SERU consortium from the 2018 SERU survey on these 2 categorizations. For race ethnicity, the maroon bars, the Minnesota distribution for these 4 race ethnicity categories. And you can see that for Minnesota, we are predominantly a white institution. So nearly 70% of our undergrad SERU responses from 2018 consider themselves white or unknown. We had a much lower percentage of students of color, Hispanic, Black, Native American, or Pacific Islander as compared to our peer group, and the same with Asian. Very similar and international. On the right, we look at the distribution for the sexual orientation item. And we can see here for Minnesota and our peer group here, we're very similar. Around 84% identify as heterosexual or straight, and a little over 15% in the queer spectrum category. Next slide, Peter. For Minnesota, we can start to look at the intersection of these race ethnicity categories by queer spectrum categories. And here you can see how the differences within race start to become apparent. For white, unknown, and Hispanic, Black, Native American, Pacific Islander, there's a slightly higher percentage of students identifying in the queer spectrum category as compared to the Asian or international groups. Next slide, Peter. So one of the things we can do now, once we've identified these groups, is we can start to look at, how do they perceive the climate? Does it differ? And here we can get a little more nuanced understanding. It's pretty consistent across the 4 race ethnicity groups that there's a difference in how students perceive the respect that they have regarding their sexual orientation. For queer spectrum, white students, only 58% agree that that there's respect for their sexual orientation. And it's even lower for queer spectrum students that consider themselves Hispanic, Black, Native American, or Pacific Islander. So these gaps are consistent across the race ethnicity groups, but more so for the students of color group. Next slide, Peter. So, looking at these different data sources gives us a little more better understanding of where these differences lie. This queer spectrum group is quite a large percentage of our undergrad population, and it's at 15% of our survey responses. We know that this group feels that there's respect for their sexual orientations far below their heterosexual peer group, and that these gaps are even larger when you start looking at by race ethnicity, particularly for students that consider themselves Hispanic, Black, African American, and American Indian and Pacific Islander, having the lowest agreement. For Raj, I will lead us into how we take this information and start to take action on it on campus with some examples of how we're doing that at the University of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. My name is Virajita Singh. I serve as Associate Vice Provost in the Office for Equity and Diversity, and I'm also a faculty member in the College of Design. I'm going to focus on sort of campus action areas with 2 examples. One is the Multicultural Student Success Steering Committee, and Peter had mentioned in his presentation about the indicators that we've developed in those committees. But the core recommendations that the MSSC committee has developed are 4. One is to increase financial support for low-income students. 2 is to examine institutional structures and effectiveness. 3 is to improve classroom climate. And 4 is to increase direct support and programs for multicultural and underrepresented students. So even as we do the work of identifying indicators and success indicators in this area, we want to keep in mind these 4 recommendations and base actions towards that. Another effort I'd like to mention is the diversity data deep dive. At the University of Minnesota, we have a diversity community of practice, and one of its committees, the assessment committee, initiated the diversity data deep dives in 2017 as an event, typically 1 day or a half day, that happens every semester with the goal of expanding the conversation about diversity and data. Specifically both quantitative data that institutions like ours are very familiar with, as well as qualitative data, which needs work as we go forward. Next slide, please. So in summary based on the presentation we've done, there are 4 areas that we think have promise in terms of potential next steps. One is that we can deepen data gathering and research in specific areas such as multicultural student success and LGBTQ students, which needs more work and also action. Second is we can connect the data to institutional metrics at different scales. Peter mentioned the MPACT metrics, which start at an institutional level, but then at a granular level, the work of the MSSSC and other efforts can also use metrics. Third, we can disseminate the data to you communities and partners engaged in action because understanding of this data is really critical to informing action. And finally, we can assess the impact of the data efforts that we're doing across the institution on an annual basis and continue to evolve the work. With that, thank you for watching our presentation. And here you'll find our contact information in case you'd like to follow up with any questions or comments. Thank you very much.